From the Essays of Michel de Montaigne, Book 1, Chapter 36, On the Custom of Wearing Clothes. Wherever I wish to turn, I have to break through some barrier of custom. So carefully is custom blocked out all of our approaches. In this chilly season, I was questioning whether the fashion in these lately discovered countries of going entirely naked is forced upon them by the heat of the air, as we assume with the Indians and the Moors, or whether it is the original custom of mankind. Since everything under the heavens, as Holy Writ declares, is subject to the same laws, Ecclesiastes 9:3, in questions like these, where we must distinguish between natural laws and those which are man-made, scholars generally turn for evidence to the natural order of the world, in which there can be no disguises. Now, all other creatures being suitably provided with the needle and thread to keep themselves alive, it is truly incredible that we alone should be brought into the world in a defective and indigent condition, a condition that indeed cannot be maintained without foreign assistance. I believe, therefore, that as plants, trees, and animals, and all living things are furnished by nature with sufficient covering to protect them from the assaults of the weather, properitaque feriris omnis blah 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 in Latin, and for this reason almost all things are covered with hide, or bristles, or shells, or hard skin, or bark. Lucretius 4. So too were we. But like those who by artificial light put out the light of day, by borrowed means we have destroyed our own. And we can easily see that it is custom which makes some things impossible for us that are not really so. For some of those peoples who have no knowledge of clothing live in climates roughly similar to ours. And moreover, our own most delicate parts are those which are always exposed. The eyes, the mouth, the nose, and the ears. And, in the case of peasants, as with our ancestors, the breast and the belly. If we were born with the need for petticoats and breeches, nature would no doubt have armed with a thicker skin those parts that she exposes to the rigors of the seasons, just as she has done with the fingertips and the soles of the feet. Why does this seem difficult to believe? I see a far greater difference between my way of dressing and a peasant's of my own district than between his and that of a man who wears nothing but his own skin. How many men, especially in Turkey, go naked out of religious devotion? Someone asked one of our beggars, whom he saw in his shirt in the depth of winter, as cheerful as anyone muffled up to the ears in sables, how he could have such endurance. "Ah, but you, sir," he replied, "have your face exposed." Well, I am all face. The Italians tell a story which is about the Duke of Florence's fool, I think. His master asked him how, in his poor clothing, he could endure the cold, when it was almost beyond his own bearing. "Follow my rule," answered the fool, "and pile on all your clothes, as I do mine. Then you will feel it no more than I." King Massinissa could not be induced to cover his head even in his extreme old age, however cold, stormy, or showery it might be, and the same is held of the Emperor Severus. In describing the battles between the Egyptians and the Persians, Herodotus records a remarkable fact noticed by both himself and by others. Of those left dead on the field, the Egyptians had incomparably harder skulls than the Persians, because the latter invariably covered their heads, first with bonnets and then with turbans, while the former were close-shaven from infancy and went always bareheaded. And King Agesilaus, until his extreme old age, had the habit of wearing the same clothes in winter as in summer. Caesar, says Suetonius, always advanced at the head of his army, and generally on foot, with his head bare, whether in sunshine or in rain. And the same is said of Hannibal. Iam versite nudo. With bare head he received the furious rain, and torrents falling from heaven. Celius Italicus. A Venetian, who lived for a long while in the kingdom of Pegu, from which he has lately returned, writes that both men and women there, though they clothe the rest of their bodies, always go barefoot, even on horseback. And Plato gives us this remarkable advice, that for the health of our whole bodies we should give the feet and the head no other covering than nature has provided. The king whom the Poles choose to succeed our own duke, and who is indeed one of the greatest princes of our time, Stephen Bathory, who succeeded Henry, Duke of Anjou, never wears gloves, nor changes, in the hardest winter weather, the bonnet that he wears indoors. While I cannot bear to be unbuttoned and unlaced, the laboring men of my district would feel shackled were they otherwise. Varro holds that when it was ordained that we should stand bareheaded in the presence of gods or rulers, this was for our health's sake, and to harden us against the weather, rather than as a sign of respect. And now that we are on the subject of cold, and, being Frenchmen, are accustomed to wearing motley colors, not I myself, for, like my father before me, I seldom wear anything but black or white. Let me add a story of another sort, told by Captain Martin Dubelay. He says that, when marching through Luxembourg, he met with frosts so sharp that the wine provided for the army had to be cut with axes and hatchets and distributed to the troops by weight, and that they carried it away in baskets. And Ovid says much the same thing. And the wine ready for serving keeps the shape of the jar. They do not drink it neat, but hand it out in lumps. At the mouth of Lake Maeotis, the frosts are so hard that in the very same place where Mithridates' lieutenant had fought the enemy dry-shod and defeated them, he defeated them once more in a naval engagement when summer came around. The Romans suffered a grave handicap in the battle they fought with the Carthaginians near Placentia. They went into the fight with their blood congealed and their limbs stiff with cold, whereas Hannibal had had fires lit throughout his camp to warm his soldiers. He had distributed oil amongst their ranks, too, so that they should anoint themselves, thus making their muscles more limber and supple, and protecting their pores against the atmosphere and the freezing wind that was then blowing. The Greeks' retreat from Babylon to their own country is famous for the hardships and discomforts that they had to overcome. One of these was that in the mountains of Armenia, they were overtaken by a terrible snowstorm and lost all knowledge of the country and the roads. It suddenly hemmed them in, and for a day and a night they were without food or drink. The greater part of their cattle died, and so did many of them. Many, too, were blinded by the hail and the dazzle of the snow. Many had their extremities frozen, and many were stiff, numb, and paralyzed with the cold, though still in full possession of their senses. Alexander saw a people who buried their fruit trees in winter to protect them from the frost. On the subject of clothes, the King of Mexico used to change his garments 4 times a day, and never wore them a second time, but used them for his continual charities and as rewards. In the same way, no pot or dish, or kitchen or table utensil was ever put before him twice.